Let's talk about my top 5 MVPs so far this season for Iowa football. And some of these may surprise you, all right? These are not going to be your mainstream MVPs. Now, I mentioned beforehand, I do not have a single offensive player in my top 5, all right? Again, not an indictment on the offense to say that nobody can emerge. And, Charlie Jones has been good. Tyler Goodson has been good. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum, he's going to be good, and he's been solid. But I just, as far as MVP so far, I'm not going to rate any of those guys ahead of who I have on this list. So let's talk about my top 5. Let's start with number 5. And fittingly enough, we land on number 5, Justin Jacobs. So he's number 5 on my list, and he's number 5 on the football field. Justin has played exceptionally well. You think back, his biggest play of the year, no question, has been the forced fumble on Breece Hall against Iowa State. And what a play. I mean, you see him here just manhandling Chase Allen, this amazing tight end for Iowa State. And again, I'm not the one calling him amazing. Other people have done that. And he's a solid tight end. There's no question. I think he's got an opportunity at the next level. But Justin Jacobs threw him aside like a rag doll on this play. What a play. And then, of course, in the second quarter, I believe it was, against Iowa State, the terrific pass coverage on Charlie Kolar, the better of the two tight ends for Iowa State. Just tremendous out of a linebacker who's playing up against a really big and really exceptional pass catcher in Kolar. And again, just a huge play in this game. And we've seen Justin look solid in run defense as well. It's hard to keep him off the field right now. I mean, you've got 3 linebackers who I think Iowa has a lot of faith in Campbell, Benson, and Jacobs. So it'll be interesting to see how much Phil Parker tweaks this defense, because who do you take off the field? Do you take Dane Belton off, who's your primary cash guy, or do you take Kayvon Merriweather off the field? That will be interesting to see. Let's go to number 4 on my list, my top 5 MVPs so far through 25% of the season, Matt Hankins. Matt Hankins hasn't had the spotlight on him a lot of this season if you throw out the 2 interceptions against Iowa State, but there's a reason for that. He is really playing good coverage right now. Of course, the interception on Brock Purdy covering Xavier Hutchinson, very solid performance against Iowa State. He actually had 2 picks in that game, and an impressive return on one of those interceptions. And again, we saw Riley Moss be picked on last week. We didn't hear much of anything from Matt Hankins. And if you're a cornerback, you kind of like to play under the radar, kind of like an offensive lineman would. If your name's not heard, that's typically good. Obviously, you like interceptions and being in the spotlight in that regard, but not hearing from Matt Hankins is a good thing. He has been exceptional at cornerback. And Riley Moss has been good at times, but again, he showed some vulnerability this past week, and we'll see if it all comes back to bite Iowa in the coming games. Number 3, and this one may surprise you, but it should not. Jack Kerner at safety. I flash back to, again, a play against Iowa State. A tackle on Breece Hall in the open field, one of the best running backs in the country in Hall. And Kerner, who's not a real athletic guy, not a real big guy, made an impressive open field tackle, and he has just been solid. Again, doesn't have the tendency to get beat over the top, is just real good in pass coverage when he needs to play one-on-one, although Iowa doesn't ask him to do that a lot. But he just plays the position well. He reminds me a lot of a guy like Brett Greenwood. And he can hit. There's no question about it. So Kerner is my number 3 player on my top 5 MVP list so far this season. Number 2, Joe Evans. This is, again, maybe surprising to some because Evans really, if you look at him from a snap standpoint, I don't have the number of snaps in front of me, but he's not a guy who's taking a ton of snaps this year. I mean, he's playing a lot more than he ever has. But Iowa's also rotating a lot of guys on this defensive line, and I'll mention another guy that I've been impressed with during my honorable mentions. But he's not playing every down. But when he's in there, he's making an impact. We've seen tipped balls. We've seen sacks. We've seen, I think back to that Week 1 game against Indiana and the pressure on Penix that caused the interception that was thrown to Dane Belton. I mean, Joe Evans, undersized guy. I've compared him a little bit to Parker Hesse with a higher motor. Had a fan on YouTube here a few weeks ago compare him to Nate Meyer. I get that comparison wholeheartedly, but he is his own guy, and again, he's a former quarterback. He has made a physical transformation and certainly a huge impact so far this year for Iowa, and expect that moving forward. Again, him and Van Valkenburg on pass rush sets, man, what a pair there, because they both have energy to no end. And my number one MVP so far this season goes to Tory Taylor. How can you go anywhere other than the Iowa punter? So far this season, every time Iowa has traded punts, I should say, Iowa has gained a 14-yard field position advantage. That is huge. We've seen a number of kicks inside the 20, a number of kicks inside the 10, and a number of kicks that have been very close to landing at the 1. Tory is also, he's developed a bigger leg. We've seen some 60-plus yard kicks out of Tory. We saw one kick that could have went a lot more had he gotten a good bounce. I mean, here's a guy who's developed from being that Australian-style punter to being, I don't want to say an American punter because he's still got those Australian roots strong in his blood, you can tell. But boy, he has learned the American-style punt, and he is doing so effectively. He's good at he's really good on every part of the field. He reminds me a lot. Again, I was not alive during this time period, but Reggie Roby, I've watched tape on him and certainly heard plenty about Reggie. Just so versatile as a punter. Big leg, but can also kick with extreme precision and accuracy. So again, my top 5 MVPs: number 5, Justin Jacobs at linebacker, Matt Hankins at corner coming in at number 4, number 3, safety Jack Kerner, number 2, defensive end Joe Evans, and number 1, Iowa's punter, Tory Taylor. Honorable mentions that we did not make into our top 5 today. Jack Campbell has been very good. The linebacking core in general. I'd add Seth Benson to that list. Both those guys have been tremendous. This linebacking core is solid. And I'd predicted that heading into the season that they'd be really, really good. And they are really, really good. Riley Moss. I was not going to put him on this list, especially given the fact that he got burned a couple times last week. But let's not forget he had 2 huge picks against Indiana. I mean, huge picks. They were both pick 6s. So you've got to at least put him on the honorable mention list. Caleb Shudak hasn't been a story. He made a huge 50-yard kick against Iowa State that kind of, boy, that was a huge kick in hindsight because Iowa ended up winning that game by 10 points. So that pushed it to pushed another score ahead. And Iowa certainly benefits from his experience. He's got some veteran leadership in him, certainly waiting his turn behind Keith Duncan. Shudak has been solid, and he's booting kickoffs into the end zone. How about this guy, Lucas Van Ness? Here's a name I did not expect to be talking about at this point in the season. He's playing more and more, big number 91. Again, I could see this guy being a starter next year. He's that good, and again, kind of a guy we weren't talking about heading into the season. Lucas Van Ness looking impressive along that defensive line. How about Tyler Goodson? Got to make him an honorable mention. I know we're kind of just going down all these different guys who have contributed, but rightfully so. Goodson's had a couple huge runs, and certainly the big one against Indiana kind of sparked things off for the season, and then last week with the 2 big touchdown runs. And Monty Pottebaum, let's give some love to the fullback. Got banged up at the end of Game 2 against Iowa State, came right back, played well last week, and how can you not show some kudos and respect for an Iowa fullback?